Hello everyone, thanks for joining our webinar on developing your first Qt Python application. If you have any questions during the session, please submit them by the Q&A button at the top of the interface. Those questions will be answered at the very end. This webinar will also be recorded and you will receive a copy of it delivered to your email account. Hope you enjoy, and I'll now hand you over to our experts, Christian and Alex. Over to you.
Okay, hello everyone, and it's really nice for me to be here to explain. We have this second webinar on Qt for Python. Hopefully you already catch the first one that was giving some introductions about the project and even some examples. But now we will dive into developing a real application for this. Alex is also here with me, and he will be joining us for the questions phase.
Hello.
So, well, my name is Cristián. I am software engineer at the Qt company, and I'm working currently on the Qt for Python project. So, I'm really happy to say here to give this second webinar of the project itself. So, some details about the project. I mean, you already heard from maybe the news from the World Summit that we are planning the release for next week. And everything is looking promising at the moment, and hopefully the release will happen in the middle of the week or something, but please stay tuned for this news. As we already discussed previously, they will be compatible with Python 2.7 and 3.5 and further versions. Of course, this release will be associated with Qt 5.12, and it will be released under the same Qt licenses like commercial and open source LGPL version 3. Okay, so the installation process, maybe you're already familiar with it, and if you got the technical preview wheels that are already on PyPy, you can install PySite separate from the whole Qt environment just with running pip install PySite 2 from your terminal. So we have a few recommendations before starting for the live coding exercise. And the first one is that we usually recommend people to start with a virtual environment. So you can install everything there, and if something was wrong or you want to have some testing wheels or something, you can then replace this virtual environment or just jump into another one. Virtual environments are created by this command, virtual env, and the name that you want to do. Additionally, you can pass, of course, the binary options and everything to select different type of Python versions. Then, I mean, of course, then you need to activate this virtual environment. And last but not least, then you finally install PySite and any other Python module that you want to start using. So, but this is the recommended environment when you start doing some small projects and everything else. But also we have some considerations if you want to start doing some development with it. So this will include if you want to submit some patch, or you want to try a new feature that you want to suggest to the project, or if you want to maybe build our tool to generate bindings, which is called shiboken. You will need to build a PySite by yourself, so then you will be able to run shiboken on your C++ and Qt projects and generate Python bindings. So for this, of course, there are more details for it, and I invite you to visit that link if you're interested. You have the three main platform there. And commonly, you have the following dependencies, of course, Python, Qt, Clang, and a certain version of CMake. So just go there if you're interested in the development side of the project and check them out. The line for building the project itself is not really complicated. You can find all this documentation inside the files itself or in our wiki and online documentation. So let's start with some recommendations and agreements. So from the previous webinar, we mentioned about styling, and particularly because we have now playing around with two different worlds, Python and Qt, and these two worlds use different name conventions. So at the end of the other webinar, we decided that we will use both just to keep everything related to Qt on the same, that looking similarly to C++, and the Python side that will have, of course, all the underscore names for functions and variables and so on and so forth. So why keeping the Qt API? I just wanted to remember you this is because it's really easy to translate code to from C++ to Python. I mean, you need to, of course, start to modify a few things, removing semicolons, parentheses, maybe changing the order of the constructors. And also because you can go to the Qt documentation and you will still understand what is going on with your code, because since the signature of the methods are almost the same. There are just a few cases that we are replacing a couple of arguments, but if that's the case, you will find it in our own documentation under doc.qt.io. So this is the Hello World example that we show in the first webinar. It's quite simple. If you're a Qt developer, you already can start to notice some Q application there and a simple Q label, and just showing this Q label and executing the application. So for Python developers that are really not aware of Qt, also this sounds really familiar of what you normally do with any other module, because there's like a couple of just import statements and some boilerplate code that you need to add, like the Q application and the execution at the end. So what is the common structure when you start to play around with small pieces of code and projects that are not so complicated? So let's consider this example that it's using our own class called MyWidget that inherits from Qt Widget. Usually the structure that we recommend is to keep the main down there, as you can see there, with the Q application showing the instantiating the MyWidget, and then start the showing and the execution of the application, while you have everything defined already in your own class on top of the file or in a different file. But also we have the case that maybe you will have many classes that are inheriting of different Qt types, and maybe one file will become really messy. So we encourage you to maybe split the classes in other files, so that you can easily import them and start to do your code, and as simple as you can see here. So for the initialization, you usually see different ways of calling the parent constructor. So far, I mean, in my personal opinion, I just use this one that for me at least is more simple to understand, that I'm calling the constructor of the Qt widget. Other people prefer to call explicitly the constructor of the parent class of my widget and then do the initialization. And other people just omit everything that is inside the parentheses and just execute it. The three of them are valid, and we just recommend you to stick with one and just keep using it. About the general coding style things, we try to follow the PEP 8 style guide, which is not completely possible because, of course, as you remember, we are using the Qt API, and at least we have camel case classes and methods and everything. But if you're really into deciding what is the best structure for your code, I really encourage you to try one of these applications that you can see on screen in no particular order. I mean, personally, I have using a couple of them, but just check them out. You have options to see messages of saying like, okay, which styling is wrong in your code, and maybe even reformatting on demand your code so you can have like a more uniform look for your code. So I guess that most of the Python developers here are already aware of these tools, but for Qt and C++ developers, maybe you can check them out. So let's do the live coding now. And for this, I want to just give you a small introduction to the topic. So I have here the Wikipedia page of the list of earthquakes that historically we have and in the world. So you can see here that the more dark areas are denoted with some dots and stuff. And if you start to go down, there's the recent ones. And then you have the global ranking, like historical ranking. And the number one, it's from my country. So I was saying, why not? Maybe we can develop together an application to visualize the information about earthquakes. So luckily, there is a website that is called the US Geological Survey that provides you with different data in the CSV files regarding all the earthquakes that we are detecting in the past hour, past day, past 7 days, and so on and so forth. You even have some categories here that you can get from a specific magnitude and start to analyze them. And of course, since it is a CSV file, then you can open it with whatever you want and just take a look at the data. So in our case, I download the past hour earthquakes, the old ones without any filtering, and also the dates ones. So let's take a look of the code. So first of all, with starting a Python project, we need to decide, okay, how do we need to handle things? I already told you that we have some CSV files here. And for example, you have there, I will just increase a little bit more if you have any issue looking at the screen or maybe the font is too small, just let us know in the chat. So we have different files there, and if you're a Python developer, you already know that this is really simple to do, but we need to know how to interact with this code. So what do we do first? Usually we need to decide that we will need to ask the user for this kind of file. So we can start, let's write some really simple code. Okay, so let's say that this is pure Python at this moment, and it's nothing related to Qt. So we will have some main, and then somehow we will need to receive an argument. So you can use two ways. Of course, the more like simple way is just to use the sys module, and then you get the arguments that you have from the system. But maybe we're going to start using something better. So personally, I really like the model that is called argparse, and from this we can just start to type or parsing process. So it's argparse, argument parser, and then we're going to start to add the options. So for the options, let's start adding an argument. And okay, we'll say that also we will accept -file, and the file name, of course, will be a string. Equals true. So in this way, we are just we are getting this parsing automatically. So let's go and do the parsing, and then we are just in our hands. You know that if you use the execution of like Python main -f and then some file, let's call it just file, we will be able to access the information and the name of that file as args.file. So inside there will be the variable. And also, for reading this data, you are also aware that we have many ways of doing it. So some people will say, okay, I can just read it line by line, but of course that's not the idea behind it, since we have many nice models that you can use. So for example, we can do it with CSV, then you have some parse method there. We can do it with NumPy, and then you have nice methods like the gen from text. And also, if you're a Python developer, you already heard of pandas that also allows you to use a method to read CSV that is called pandas.readCSV. So just for this example, and because I decided we will just use pandas, since of course it's one of the most popular modules out there to dealing with data sets. So for this, you know that we can just import the module, and then we can do something along these lines, like read CSV, and I told you already that the file was there, so you can read this and maybe store this data. So let's jump to the first file that I have for you. Everything that I am writing here, it will be put on the wiki page and also in official documentation, but at the moment, we need to release it. It will come with the release of Qt for Python. So here is the same idea that we were describing before, but of course I did a couple of things that just to have a more fancier code, I just put a function here that is reading the CSV, and we are printing the date. So for this, let's use the same structure. We will use the hours, which is of course the shortest file. And for this, you can get an idea of the data frame that we are working with. So we have many different columns that they are described here in the USGS website. Since we want to keep this example simple, we will just focus on the time and the magnitude of the earthquake. Okay, so what is the next step that we can try to do? So of course we have here already in our file that I was just showing you, some reading data and getting the data, but you saw that the data is a data frame. So what do we need to do now? So first of all, if we want to get some specific columns like the magnitude, we can just do data that would include the data frame, and then we can get the column that is called magnitude. The same with the date, that we can do, let's put date equals data. That sounds complicated, but it's not. And then we get the time. The problem with this is that maybe we will encounter some issues about the format of the variables. So for example, let's print this. Let's print the magnitude and see more or less what is the output. Okay, seems like floating types, so no problem with that. So let's print now the date. Okay, so if you are not familiar with this format is a UTC format. So we have the date here, the year, the month, the day, then T, then the hour, the minutes, the seconds, and the milliseconds, and the set at the end. So what do we need to do now? So we need to take into account that we have a special format, and we would like to have this information in an application. So we have many modules in Python to handle this kind of data, also in C++, but since we are here to talk about Qt for Python, we will use something from Qt. So let's forget about the import statement, but just for you to have an idea, we have a class that is called QDateTime. And with this class, we can get and transform the date that in the UTC format already to something that is more familiar to Qt. So we can use, for example, the from string, and we can use any data, but we need to define a format. So the format that we already saw, so let's call it, and let's see if I remember correctly, it was month, day, hours, minutes, seconds, milliseconds, and so on and so forth. So this is the format that we already saw. I mean, we are just specifying it like a Python string, and then we just use it. So here should be the first element of date. Hopefully, I don't know what this will print, but let's try it out. So here, we forgot the file. So let's have the hours. Of course, I told you that we're forgetting about the module. So let's just import so we will just go to PySide. So this is in chord, and we date time. And look, we have the first time here in the UTC format, but down here, we have already the representation of an object that is a QDateTime with all the information properly parsed here. Okay, even the milliseconds there. The last element of this, which is a 0, it depends on the time zone that we have. That maybe also we would like to change. And since I am now in Berlin, we would like to use the time zone of Berlin. So let's take a look of how this thing will look. So here you can see the same idea as before. We already described that we can transform the dates with a specific format and just return the information. And also I mentioned about the time zone. So here you can see how this line has the time zone of Europe Berlin. And then we can just apply the information that we got from the data frame. So here you have a simple lambda function that is just calling the transform date function that we just see at the top of the screen with the specific time zone, which is a Q time zone. We also have some cleaning process here that, since of course we are getting all the data, it contains of course faulty values, and maybe there are some magnitudes that are negative and other kind of things that are not correct for the model. So we are just dropping here a couple of all the lines that has magnitude lower than 0, which make no sense for us. I don't know how is an inverted earthquake, so of course it makes no sense to do it. And we are returning this data separately. So we have here the data, we have times and magnitudes, and of course it's a tuple, and we can just execute this, and we can have the two information here. You see, for every single one, we have the representation that we already saw. And at the bottom, of course, we have still the magnitudes, which is your pure floating point numbers. So what's the idea now? So we'll need to start to do some things for the Qt application. So let's take a look of like the next example right away. So what I am doing here is similarly what you saw in the Hello World example. So just please focus on the last section of the code. We have a new application and we are creating a main window. And we're just showing and executing the application. So let's take a look of this main window class. So as you can see here, this is well, I will just maybe move a little bit more yes. We can see the whole class. That's a whole class. We are again inheriting from Q main window. We are calling the constructor. We are getting some title. For Qt developers, this is quite easy and understandable. For Python users, please bear with me, but it's just a matter of getting used to this kind of API. Then we are getting the menu bar, which is something that we are getting with the main window. And we are setting some options here. So for the classical menus that you always have at the top of applications, you can add Qt actions. So in this case, we are just including the exit one. We can easily set a shortcut here with the Ctrl Q. And we are triggering, we are connecting the trigger signal to a slot that we have already defined here. That is just exiting the app. You can see other things here, like we can access the status bar of the Q main window, and we can put some message there. This is just the geometry of the windows. We are just fixing the size for this example, but of course you can modify here whatever you want later, and then maybe add more actions and stuff like that. So what does this example looks like? By the way, I haven't touched any of the other methods that we have there. It's just the same things that we already saw. So let's execute this one. Okay. Don't panic. It's okay that it's white. It's completely blank because, of course, we don't have any data yet. We haven't done anything. We are just showing an empty Q main window. As you can see, this is the file menu that we were describing with the Q action, and the status bar is here. That also we couldn't see it because let's close it. I'm using Ctrl Q now, and it worked. Just for you to know, here is the message that we show at the beginning of the application. So okay, we have almost everything that we need, but now we need to start putting all the data there. So for the next step, what do we need to do? So let's think about, we need to present this information. We already mentioned that it's a table of data. So my idea here is to maybe put a table on the application. And for this, we will try to do the following. The structure here is quite simple, and the only new factors that you can see here are the widget case, and that we are using that widget for creating the main window. So the main window, we have a central widget with some information that we need to decide in the class that we have here that is called widget. So for adding information on table, you have a couple of options. For example, one really popular is the Qt table widget that you can already use. And it's quite simple to do, but just for the sake of this example, we are using the Qt table view. So we have the main windows there, nothing new, but only this line that we are setting now, the widget that we are receiving here in the constructor, the function that we already saw, and here we have the new class, widget class. So with the widgets, we are just getting some model that I will just explain, and we are creating the table view. So we are adding this model to the table view, doing something with the header, just adapting and resizing the tables to the content that we have inside, setting some options to stretch the table just to fit the whole thing, dealing with the sizes of the Qt widget itself, and of course, setting everything inside a main layout for this widget. So I was saying something about a model here, which is quite important. I mean, the Qt table view will need a model to work and display data. So if we go to here, I am quite certain that if we go to Qt table view, Qt, we're already having some hints of what do we need to do in the official documentation. We have you have here all the documentation of the classes and stuff, and you can notice that some of the methods that we already showed before are virtual. So we have a couple of these methods that are virtual, and one of the one that we need to instantiate. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong. So it's a Qt abstract table model. Yes. Okay, here we have more information. So we are using a Qt abstract table model for the model of this table view, and you already get some hints. Maybe the font is too small. I will just increase it for you. And you can read here, when subclassing the Qt abstract table model, you must implement row count, column count, and data. There's, of course, other things that have some default behavior, but they require us just a minimum of implementing these three methods. So this will tell our application how to deal when we want to populate the model with data and what to deal with the amount of columns and rows that we have. So let's go back to our code. We said that we were setting here a custom table model. And surprise, surprise, of course, is the same class that we were looking at it. So here we have the Qt abstract table model, just calling the parent constructor, and we have some small function here just for the fanciness of the example to load the data. We are sending it from the constructor, so we are getting here the values of the first column and the second column as the data magnitudes. We are setting the column count that we know that is 2, and the row count that will be all elements of each of these two variables. So you saw that there was requirements of implementing row count and column count, and you can take this implementation from the documentation. And also there were data was required. And for data, there's nothing outside this world too. We get some information about which column and row this model is calling at the same time, just to do something, to put data on it. And we can have some specific behavior if we are getting a display role in the Qt table. So if we want to show something, if we are in the first column, we need to deal with the data. So we have the dates that we already saw in this QDateTime class. So we have a nice method to convert it to Python and removing here some precision. And if this is the magnitude, you saw that it was just floating points. So we are just putting there the floating point with 2 zeros after the comma. So we also have some specifications for the color of this. So we have a white, and also we have by default. And that's it. I mean, this is just a model. We have also here a method that was not required, but we are getting it anyways because we want to have some information on the header of the table that says the name of the column. And this is just that. So let's execute this example. As you can see here, we already have our previous empty Qt windows, but now we have a table on top of it. We have the date that is fit into the length of the string, and they have the magnitude that is reaching the whole and filling the whole widget. So, okay, we have the table now. But of course, we don't want to just do that. We want to improve a little bit our application. So what's the next idea? Maybe we can have a table here that's one of the really famous Qt charts examples in Qt, which is called model data, that we can have this table on the right and have some plot, sorry, this table on the left and some plot on the right. So I am, again, control Qing just to exit. So what do we need for that? So let's take a look at the next step. We already have the same that we will display last time. Nothing has been modified here. The main window, again, is displaying the same thing, is relying completely on the widget. So we can modify everything on the widget already setting there. Nothing changed there. Our functions are still there. And here we start to see a few variations. So this is the widget that we already described with the information about how to will display in the headers, remember, precising the contents. But now we are creating a chart. So for the chart, we already know that we will need to have something else and not just a chart. I mean, the chart is something that we are building, but we need to place it inside on something. So where do we need to put a chart? In a Qt chart view. So it's quite simple. It's just a couple of lines, and then you will need to start to play around with the layouts. And if you're a Qt developer, you already know that you can put some horizontal stretch just to see more or less the dimensions and the width of both elements. And we are putting now each widget next to each other. So we have on the left side the table view, and on the right side we have the chart view. But we haven't seen anything else regarding the charts. We just have the declaration of the object. So what does this example look like? So we can see it here that at least now we have the proper distribution of the example. So we are expecting now to do something with our Qt chart. Then we can put here. So for this, let's just go for the next example. And if I am not mistaken, this is the last one that we have. I mean, the last piece of code. And again, let's go down, and nothing has changed here. In our main window, nothing has changed. Here, our functions are still there. And here, something new starts to appear. So let's go to the top of this widget. So this is the widget that we already discussed. But now we have some new things here. So first of all, we have some instructions here to adding a series. So this means that we are including some data that we want to plot. This will translate into a line. We have a magnitude, of course, which is the column that we want to plot. Then we already had this layout that we already discussed about putting something on the left and on the right, and putting the layout. So what is this add series method that this is in the new line that we have in this example? So let's go there. So this method will be in charge of creating the line of our plot, but of course we will need to populate it with the data that we already have. For this, we will create a simple line series, and we will put everything here. Just take this series as a combination of X, Y for a certain amount of elements. So then we start the filling process that we are getting, for example, the data that we are currently getting. We have our format that it was already changed, and we are transforming it to Qt datetime again, and getting the magnitude. So please notice that since, of course, we want to plot dates, we cannot put this like row on the top of the Qt chart. So we need to do some transformation. So there is this nice function, this method that's called 2 milliseconds since epoch that you can use. Also, you have the variation without a milli, so just seconds, if for some reason your system does not support a number with a higher precision. Then we have the floating point of the data that we have there for the magnitudes. We are making sure that we don't have any negative values here, because of course those will make no sense. And maybe in the transformation something was broken or something. And then to the chart, we are adding this series, which of course is just pairs of XY data. Okay, so we said that we wanted to do some date time plot. So for this, we have a special class that is called QDateTime axis. So we are just creating for the x-axis a specific axis for dates. So we are getting the amount of ticks that we are getting, the special format, since most of the data is from 2018. I'm just putting the day and the month and just the hour and the minute of the earthquakes, just to have a reference. Then some title to this axis, alignment, and then put it finally to the series, which is something that we're already creating. For the y-axis, we don't need any fancy options, just a Q value axis will do the work. And for this, again, we are setting a certain amount of sticks, some label information, the title, and just including this axis. We're also putting here some color that, if you can see here, we are accessing the series, the pen, the color, and the name of this color, just to keep it in our model. Do you remember what was the model? It was associated with the table. So in this case, we can use the same color that we have for the plot, and maybe put some background color on the column that we are currently using. Okay, so something new here. Here we have, well, you can see here the imports and now we have some new attributes here, like the color. Now in the data method, we also have here some conditions when we are working with the first column. We are using the color that we already saved from the plot. The header data hasn't changed. Let's take a quick review. So nothing new here. Do you remember just the add series that was doing all the magic of including this? We have some options here of anti-aliasing, and apparently we are ready to try it out. So let's go for it. So we have the example and we have the hours. As you can see here, the animation that you saw at the beginning is just also an option that you can set if you're concerned about performance. Of course, you can disable it and everything. And we have already here that we are plotting the magnitude on the y-axis, and we have some dates on the x-axis. The color thing that I was mentioning to you is like we have here some color, and here the column has some color too. So again, since of course it's a simple example, you can modify a few things and maybe allow the user to modify the values of this table, maybe changing this format, splitting in more columns, maybe adding more columns to the table from this huge data set that we have, and adding more plots, so more lines to your plot. So everything is already settled. So, and let's try, for example, another file with more data. So here we can see like now we have way more data, like 300 something here, and you can start to see a lot of variations about the earthquake that we are feeling. Nothing too strong so far, so I think that we are all safe. And okay, so what else do you want to see? I don't know if we ever have another data set. How confusing could it be to look? Yeah, well, we have months and weeks and stuff, but I mean, we are talking about like a lot of file lines there. So you can see the difference between the hours and the day, and then we are like 13,000. So let's go back to the presentation now. So you already saw a real application that any place could use for handling any type of data. And the scheme is quite simple. We have some table, we have some plot. And then of course, I'm looking forward to see if people can take this example and maybe extend it a little bit. As I said, we will publish it in the official documentations, and hopefully you can have some nice idea and you can start your own project and start to play around of manipulating data or dealing with huge data sets and just visualizing them on a nice Python 2 application. So just a few words about the project itself. What's next with the project? I mean, at the moment, we are just testing the new release. And, but of course, we would like to have more fancy options for you to use in your application. So one of them is to improve the interaction with the other scientific or data modules, like you already saw, like pandas. Also we have NumPy and everything that is inside SciPy. So maybe we can have smarter ways of populating these table models that we already saw, or maybe some charts with data types from these popular Python models. Another really interesting topic is the deployment of application. And for this, you need to remember that, of course, you would like to write your amazing application and maybe send it to a friend that is not using Linux, but is using Windows. So, of course, we would like to provide you a way to deploy your application and allow users to change it for different platforms that we are currently supporting. There are other nice features that if you are concerned about how dynamic is Python and you really want to make sure that you have the proper data types for your functions and to maybe even compile your code or something, so maybe we will work on a better integration with MyPy. About the integration of things that we have, there's already some plans, and I am pretty sure that you already saw the blog post that now the Qt Creator supports the language server protocol, and we are getting Python for free. So, for example, we can take a look here for Qt Creator, and as you can see here, we already are full compatible with everything that comes with Python. So you can see all this nice auto completion, and I can get some suggestions of the models. Here is if I make some mistakes, for example, here. You know that it's a styling guide that you need to have 2 blank lines before your classes, so you can try to fix these kind of things. And of course, it's way more than just syntax highlighting. You can get a lot of information now about the types that are inside the methods with the new release, because we were working on providing this type hint information. And also, of course, you are able to run the examples from the Qt Creator itself. So this is the same that we already saw. So you can configure these things. So you have some configuration for which Python to execute. Remember that we discussed about virtual environments and so on and so forth. So this kind of things is still not complete, but of course, once it's out of beta, we will maybe include some options about deployments and stuff. Also, maybe we'll studying the options to go to embedded system and mobile development. And maybe, why not, some integration with other Qt tools that could happen to appear in the next couple of years. So what's next? We are really community driven. I mean, this is speaking to customers and also open source users that we are really active on IRC. So we will really love to hear what do you need for PySide 2 to become a better project. And now I think that we can start maybe the QA session, and here you can find all the information about PySide, about mailing lists, the IRC channel, and also if you want to contact me on any of these platforms. So Alex, I don't know if we have a couple of questions.
So yeah, we have some questions already. So if you have any further questions, just print them in the box, and I will try to make sure that we get to all of them as much as we have time. So Cristián, I mean, you mentioned it briefly already. Where can we get the code files for today's session?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, we will upload it in the wiki page, and also hopefully we can put it in the official documentation. But we are already working on that. So hopefully for the release, you will be able to get everything that you already saw here, including the steps, step-by-step code.
Okay. How is PySide 2 licensed for commercial use? Maybe just a brief summary what the licenses are that is available under, and how you can get the commercial one then.
Okay, well, now PySide will be completely included inside Qt. I mean, we already stated at the beginning of the presentation that commercials. I mean, any people with the commercial license from Qt will be able to use Qt for Python, and yeah, I mean, that's it. I mean, there is no tricky or something under the hood, but it's just the pure Qt license will allow you to use it for commercial purposes. But of course, also you have the open source version.
So maybe a small add-on for me there. Qt for Python is essentially attached to the Qt AD licensing. So if you have a Qt AD license, you basically have, you can get PySide on a commercial license, or you have PySide on a commercial license already. It's included in that part. Although at this point, they are still released somewhat separately. Good. Then can I use Python with QML?
Yes, of course. I was hesitating of maybe including some QML example, but I mean, the time flies. So maybe we can plan for a new webinar that explains more or less the same idea. But yes, we have. And inside the examples, you can find a couple of declarative, under the declarative directory, a couple of examples that is a QML interacting with Python.
Mm-hmm. Maybe yet another question. How does PySite or Qt for Python work together with other IDEs?
Well, since now we have since the release, we will have support for type hinting. Any IDE that supports type hinting or the language server protocol will be able to get some information about PySite too. So in the past, this was one of our main concerns, but now everything is set up. So after the release, you can use any IDE that supports language server protocol, and you will get the proper syntax highlighting, auto-completion, and of course, information about the type for the methods.
Mm-hmm. That actually already concludes our questions so far. Okay. Unless anybody else has anything. Oh, well, there's more coming in.
Just one that just got in here.
Yeah. So how do you distribute applications made using Qt for Python? For instance, to the usual Windows or Linux platforms?
Well, I was talking about this, that deployment is our #1 priority for this new year that starts soon. And at the moment, we just recommend users to use any of the tools that you can find out there. Like personally, I have just PyInstaller and CXFreeze, but it will really depend on you. So hopefully next year, we can have some general solution that you can have this process automated, but some PySite 2 tool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think that was it for the questions, unless there's any that come in the next few seconds. Yeah, I think that was it for the questions for today. Thank you so much, Cristián and Alex, for a great webinar. If you do have any more questions, please email those over to info@qt.io. But I think we're done here. So thank you very much for everyone for joining, and we'll see you next time.
See you.
Bye.